Have you ever found yourself in a strangely unsettling moment when you're standing in the middle of a crowded room, filled with laughter and conversation, everything unfolding as it normally would? Yet inside you, there is a silence so deep, it feels almost frightening. You still nod, still smile, still respond the way you always do, but a part of you stands apart, as if you're not truly there. No one notices, and perhaps you've grown used to the fact that no one ever does. This is the kind of loneliness no one talks about. Not the loneliness of being alone in an empty room, but the kind that exists when you are surrounded by people, yet no one truly reaches who you really are. It's not loud, not dramatic, not easy to recognize. It is quiet, persistent, and over time, it becomes so familiar that you begin to believe, maybe something is wrong with me, maybe I'm too sensitive, maybe I'm asking for too much. But the truth is, that feeling doesn't come from a lack of people around you. It comes from never having truly been seen. Not seen with the eyes, but understood, felt, accepted without needing to reshape yourself to fit someone else. And when that doesn't happen for long enough, you begin to adapt in a very specific way. You show up, but you don't fully open. You connect, but only on the surface. You speak, but you hold back the most important parts of yourself. Gradually, you become the person everyone sees as fine, the one who can blend in, communicate, maintain relationships. But no one knows how much of your true self you had to trade away to do that. And the irony is, the better you become at it, the more distant you feel. Because what others are connecting with isn't really you. It's the version of you that has been adjusted to be accepted. And then one day, you realize something that's hard to put into words. You are not lonely because there is no one. You are lonely because no one truly knows who you are. That is where this story begins. Not to say that you need more people, or that you need to change yourself to fit in better, but to understand something deeper. There are kinds of loneliness that don't come from the outside world, but from the way you've learned to exist within it. And once you understand that, you begin to see everything differently, your relationships, the way you show up, and even the way you treat yourself. There is something very subtle, yet it shapes almost your entire experience of loneliness, the way you show up in your relationships. It's not about how many people you have around you, but how much of your real self you bring into those interactions. Most people don't realize that they are not truly present in their relationships. They are there physically, they talk, they respond, they participate, but internally, they are always holding something back, a thought that is never spoken, an emotion that is kept down, a part of their true self that remains behind the scenes, quietly observing everything. You can notice this in very small moments. When you are about to say something but then stop yourself. When you want to share a deeper, more honest thought, but choose a safer response instead. When you don't fully agree, but still nod along just to keep things smooth. You don't do this because you are fake. You do it because you have learned that, in order to be accepted, you need to fit in. And over time, that need to fit in slowly replaces authenticity. You begin to adjust the way you speak depending on who you're with. You filter which parts of yourself to show and which parts to hold back. You learn how to make yourself easy to understand, easy to be around, pleasant. But the cost is that you are no longer fully yourself. The irony is that the better you become at this, the more people seem to accept you. Others see you as fine, approachable, easy to talk to. You can blend in, maintain relationships, and exist quite normally in the social world. But that's exactly when the emptiness begins to appear. Because at a deeper level, you know that what others are connecting with is not really you, it's the version of you that has been edited. And no matter how much they like you, no matter how much time they spend with you, you still don't feel understood. Not because they don't care, but because they've never truly had the chance to reach your real self. That's why you can be in the middle of a conversation, even laughing and engaging naturally, yet still feel a sense of separation inside, as if you are playing a role you've practiced so well that you no longer have to think about it. And then, when it's all over, when you're alone again, you feel an unexplainable kind of exhaustion. Not because you did too much, but because you weren't truly yourself the entire time. In this case, loneliness doesn't come from a lack of people. It comes from not being fully present. You are there, but not really there. You are seen, but not understood. And over time, the distance between who you truly are and who you present to the world keeps growing. And once you become used to not fully showing up like that, the next thing almost happens naturally. The relationships around you begin to stay on the surface. You still talk to people every day. There are still conversations, questions, and exchanges back and forth. But if you look closely, you'll notice a pattern. Things rarely go deeper than what feels stable and safe. People ask you about work, about plans, about what's happening on the outside. You answer. You ask them in return. They answer, and the conversation flows on, smooth and complete. Nothing wrong, but nothing that truly touches you either. At first, you don't think much of it, because everyone is like that. Everyone is busy. Everyone has their own life. It's not always possible to sit down and talk about something deep, but over time, you begin to sense something difficult to name. Even though you're connecting with many people, none of those connections really stay with you. You can remember who you talked to and what you discussed, but you don't feel like you were understood any more than before, and you don't truly understand them any better either. Everything remains at the level of information, not connection. The issue isn't that those conversations are shallow. The issue is that you begin to live in an environment where depth no longer seems to have a place. Real questions like how you're truly feeling, what you're afraid of, what you're struggling with, rarely come up. And if they do, they are often brushed past quickly, as if no one is really willing to pause long enough to go there. So you learn not to go deep either. You keep everything light, easy to understand, comfortable, not emotionally demanding. You become someone who is easy to talk to, but not someone who is truly understood. You can talk to many people, but there is no one you can fully speak to. And that is what creates a very particular kind of loneliness. You are not lacking communication. You are not lacking interaction, but you are missing those moments when you feel, I was just truly reached. It's when you say something real, and the other person doesn't rush to respond or change the subject, but actually listens. It's when you don't have to over-explain and still feel understood. It's when you feel you don't have to simplify yourself just to fit the conversation. But when those moments become rare, you begin to adapt in the opposite direction. You stop expecting. You stop seeking. You accept that relationships only need to be good enough. And from the outside, everything still looks fine. Only you know that there is still a part of you waiting for something real, a conversation not meant to fill the silence, but to truly touch it. And when that doesn't happen for long enough, you don't just feel lonely. You begin to feel like you are living among many relationships, without truly being in any of them. And when everything has stayed on the surface for too long, another feeling begins to emerge, deeper and more unsettling, the feeling of not truly being understood, even after you've tried so hard to explain. There may have been moments when you opened up, not all the time, but there were times when you genuinely tried to express what you were thinking, what you were feeling. You chose your words carefully. You tried to be clear. You hoped that this time, the other person would understand. But the response you received left you quiet. It's not always a clear rejection. Sometimes it's just a reply that's too quick, too simple, not really touching what you just shared. Sometimes they change the subject. Sometimes they interpret it in a completely different way. And there are moments when they don't even realize that you just said something very important to you. Moments like that, if they happen once, may not mean much. But when they repeat often enough, you begin to form a quiet belief. Maybe no one really understands me. And from there, you change. You stop trying to explain so much. You shorten your stories. You leave out the most important details. You respond in ways you know others will get quickly, even if it doesn't fully reflect who you are. Not because you don't want to be understood, but because you no longer believe that trying will lead to anything different. You get used to keeping things inside. From the outside, you still seem fine. You still communicate, still interact, still have normal conversations. But internally, there is a growing distance between what you truly think and what you choose to say. And that distance doesn't just exist between you and others. It begins to exist within you. You carry thoughts that no one knows, feelings that no one touches, stories you no longer even try to tell. That's when loneliness shifts into another form. No longer the absence of connection, but the feeling that you're carrying a part of yourself that no one can step into. This is especially painful because you are not someone who doesn't want to connect. On the contrary, you deeply want to be understood, to be heard, to share something real. But when those efforts are not met in the right way, you slowly learn a different lesson. It's safer to stay silent, and that silence is not peace. It is a layer of protection, a way to avoid further disappointment. But at the same time, it is what gradually distances you from the possibility of real connection. Because to be understood, you have to be seen. And to be seen, you have to allow others in. But when you've grown too used to not being understood, opening up again is no longer simple. It comes with risk. The risk of being overlooked, misunderstood, or worse, dismissed. So, you choose the safer option, to hold back. And that very act of holding back is what keeps you among people, talking with them, laughing with them, yet still feeling as if no one ever truly reaches you. And once you become used to not being understood, not going deep, not truly showing up, the environment around you begins to reinforce that, especially in the way we connect in this era. You can talk to many people every day without ever meeting them. You can text, reply, react, and scroll through other people's lives in just a few seconds. Everything feels connected. There's always someone there, always some form of interaction. But if you look closely, you'll notice something strange. You can reach the entire world, yet not feel truly close to anyone. Conversations gradually become shorter, faster, more efficient. But in doing so, they also lose their depth. You reply when it's convenient. You send just enough of a response. You watch stories, leave a reaction, then keep scrolling. Everything keeps moving, but nothing really stays. And more importantly, you begin to get used to this kind of connection, a kind of connection that doesn't require you to open up, that doesn't ask you to explain too much, that doesn't force you to face someone else's emotions, or even your own. It's convenient, fast, low risk, but precisely because of that, it's not enough to create the feeling of being truly understood. You can be seen through images, through posts, through what you share, but being seen is not the same as being understood. Sometimes, you may even feel more distant after interacting. You've just talked to someone, exchanged messages back and forth, but when it ends, you don't feel any closer. Nothing has shifted. There's no sense of connection, just a sequence of exchanges, and then it stops. And gradually, you begin to confuse interaction with connection. You tell yourself that since you're not completely alone, since there are still people to talk to, people who respond, maybe you shouldn't feel lonely. But inside, something says otherwise. A feeling that is very clear yet hard to explain. Everything is happening, but nothing is truly reaching you. It goes even deeper. When you get used to this fast, surface-level way of connecting, your ability to stay with deeper conversations begins to fade. You're no longer used to sitting with an emotion, a story, a person for long. You lose your familiarity with slowness, with truly listening, with entering into things that are not easy to say. And so, even when a real opportunity for connection appears, you might unconsciously pass it by, not because you don't want it, but because you've adapted to a different rhythm, faster, lighter, less risky. But what is the cost of that convenience? It's that you can live in a world where everyone is available, but no one is truly present. You can talk to many people, but have no conversation deep enough to make you feel understood. And when that continues long enough, loneliness is no longer just a passing feeling. It becomes a baseline state, something that stays with you no matter how many interactions you have. Because in the end, what you truly need is not another conversation, another message, or another person to talk to. What you need is a connection real enough that you no longer feel alone, even when you are not by yourself. In the end, if you look back at everything you've been through, you'll begin to realize something very different from what you once believed. This feeling of loneliness is not a sign that you are lacking something, nor is it proof that you are difficult or incompatible with others. It is simply a signal, a very clear signal, that what you are experiencing around you is not real enough to truly reach you. You are not lonely because you have no one. You are lonely because your current connections do not reflect who you truly are. And once you understand that, the way you see everything begins to change. You no longer try to force yourself to fit in at all costs. You no longer blame yourself for feeling out of place in a crowd. You no longer believe that you need to talk more, open up more, or be easier to understand in order to connect. Because you begin to see that the issue is not that you are not enough, but that you've grown too used to connections that are not deep enough. There may still be moments when you feel alone. You may still find yourself in spaces where you don't fully belong. But this time, that feeling no longer carries self-doubt. It simply becomes a reminder. This is not a place meant for your true self, and there is nothing wrong with that. Instead of trying to find more and more people, you begin to look for something different. Fewer connections, but real ones. Conversations that don't need to be perfect, but are honest enough that you don't have to perform. People with whom you don't have to simplify yourself just to be accepted. Because in the end, what you truly need is not to be surrounded by many people, but to be in the right place where you can be yourself without having to defend who you are. And there is a paradox you will slowly come to understand. When you stop trying so hard not to feel lonely, that is exactly when real connection begins. Not because the world has changed, but because you have changed the way you show up within it. So if you are feeling alone, even when you are not by yourself, don't rush to assume that something is wrong with you. You may simply be very close to an important truth. You don't need more people. You only need connections real enough that you no longer have to hide yourself.